Welcome to Mill History Talk, the podcast where we explore the past to better understand the profession of arms today. We dive into the campaigns, conflicts, issues, and commanders that have shaped military thinking across centuries, and why it all still matters. Whether you're an officer in training, a seasoned professional, a student of strategy, or simply curious about how history informs modern warfare, this space is for you. Our mission is simple: to foster insight, reflection, and critical thinking primarily through the lens of military history. Before we begin, a quick note. The views expressed in this podcast are those of the podcast writers, hosts, and guests, and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any government agency or organization. So, whether you're listening in a barracks, a lecture hall, at the gym, or in your car on the way to work, welcome. We're glad you're here.
Welcome to Mill History Talk, where we break down the turning points that shaped how wars were fought. I'm Brian.
And I'm Hope, here to make sure this doesn't turn into a 3-hour medieval dissertation with Latin footnotes.
I'll try to restrain myself. This is the first episode in our new series, following the evolution of armies from the early modern period all the way to today.
Which means we start with armor, swords, and heroic charges, and end up with drones, satellites, and some guy in his parents' basement with a laptop halfway around the world.
Not quite, but almost. We will get to today's military at the end of the series, but today's story is about the end of the medieval knights' dominance and how mercenary armies took over between 1300 and 1600.
So basically, how we went from nobleman in shining armor to guy with a pike, a paycheck, and possibly a bad attitude.
Exactly. For centuries, the knights' mounted charge was the centerpiece of European warfare. But by 1300, cohesive infantry, if properly trained, positioned, and led, could stop them cold.
Let me guess. I suspect this did not go over well with the noble cavalrymen.
Exactly. Two early wake-up calls prove the point. First, Courtry in 1302. Flemish militia, mostly guildsmen, prepared the ground, formed dense formations, and broke repeated French mounted assaults. They even collected the golden spurs from fallen knights as trophies.
So basically the medieval version of taking the enemy's challenge coin.
Then 12 years later, Bannockburn. Robert the Bruce's Scots used close-order spearmen, called schiltrons, on constricted ground to ruin English cavalry.
So we're talking about an early version of don't charge the hedgehog.
Pretty much. The point was clear. Heavy cavalry charging without infantry or missile support risked disaster.
And yet, I bet they kept doing it anyway.
Oh yeah, the 100 Years' War, 1337 to 1453, was a master class in how to humiliate French chivalry. At Crécy, Poitiers, and Agincourt, English forces combined dismounted men-at-arms with longbowmen behind stakes.
Agincourt's the one with the mud, right? Where the French knights basically tried to gallop their massive armored horses, themselves wearing heavy plate armor, through a swamp under arrow fire.
Yes, narrow frontage, mud, defensive sighting, all made worse by volleys of arrows. John Keegan described it as victory through cohesion and discipline, not shock. Clifford Rogers even argues the 100 Years' War sparked military revolutions, long before the famous Trace Italien era.
So the lesson here is, don't underestimate a good defensive position.
And don't underestimate gunpowder. By the late 14th century, handheld firearms and improved crossbows were adding serious penetration power. Large bombards could smash medieval curtain walls. Armor got heavier to keep up, but that made cavalry slower and more expensive.
Which is where the Swiss come in, right?
Yes. In the 1470s, the Swiss showed how disciplined, aggressive infantry could dominate open battlefields. At Grandson, Merton, and Nancy, their pike squares annihilated Charles the Bold's Burgundian armies.
3 wins in a row. That's like the medieval Super Bowl. Go Chiefs! Sorry, I just had to get that in.
Okay, football aside, those victories ended Burgundy's bid for great power status and made Swiss mercenaries the hottest commodity in Europe.
And if you couldn't hire the Swiss,
You made your own. In the late 1480s, Maximilian I created the Landsknechts, pike-armed, colorful, disciplined, contracted under capitulations.
the guys with the slash sleeves and you can't afford me attitudes.
Exactly. By the early 1500s, most European powers were fielding paid infantry blocks, Swiss or Landsknecht, because you could raise them quickly with cash, not slow feudal musters.
And then the Spanish level up.
Yes, by combining pikemen with arquebusiers into large composite formations called tercios, they had both staying power and firepower. At Pavia in 1525, they used this combination to destroy French gendarmes and capture King Francis I.
So the knight's not just losing the spotlight, he's being written out of the script.
Right. And siege warfare sealed the deal. The bastion trace Italian fortresses could withstand bombardment, but taking them required months-long sieges and large garrisons, forces that only well-funded states could sustain.
Which means feudal levies were out, mercenaries were in.
Exactly. England commuted service to money through scutage and hired soldiers under indenture contracts. France created the Compagnie d'Ordonnance in 1445, permanent gendarme companies funded by royal taxation.
And here's where we start getting fiscal military states, right? Governments built to tax, borrow, and keep armies in the field year-round.
Correct. Mercenaries fit perfectly, quick to raise, easy to redeploy, and, at least in theory, easy to disband. Italy had been doing it for centuries with condottieri.
Though disband sometimes meant plunder the nearest city.
Yes, that sometimes happened, and it wasn't pretty. Rome in 1527 is the classic example. Unpaid Landsknechts out of control and taking payment in loot.
So culturally, we've gone from knightly honor to just follow the articles of war.
Yes, chivalric norms valued personal prowess and ransom. 16th century war valued formation drill, volley fire, and logistics. Ordinances codified pay, discipline, and camp behavior.
So knights still existed, but now they're just part of the combined arms team.
By 1600, aristocratic cavalry still handled reconnaissance, pursuit, and shock, but the organizing principle of war had shifted to paid infantry and artillery, often foreign, frequently mercenary, whose strength was drilled cohesion, not noble blood.
So the knight went from lead singer to backup vocals, and the mercenary took center stage.
And that's the world we'll follow in the rest of this series. Next time, we'll see how these professional armies evolved in the centuries that followed.
Translation: fewer golden spurs, more spreadsheets.
Thanks for joining us for Mill History Talk. I'm Brian.
And I'm Hope. See you next time.